You wake up on a Tuesday at 6:41 a.m. to a bank notification that doesn't make sense. $804 million deposited overnight from a family trust you didn't know existed. An uncle you met twice in your life. A quiet man named Edwin, who ran a hardware distribution company nobody thought twice about, spent 51 years building something nobody ever saw. And now, without warning, all of it belongs to you. You don't sleep again that night. You sit in the dark doing math that doesn't feel real, and somewhere around 4 a.m., something in you decides the only way to make it real is to spend it. So you do. By Friday, you're standing in a Rolex boutique on a marble floor so polished you can see your own reflection under the display cases. You point at a Daytona in white gold, the one with the ice blue face, and the salesman doesn't blink when you pay in full. $218,000 gone in the time it takes to sign a receipt. It feels like nothing. It feels incredible. You trade in the sedan with the check engine light for a Lamborghini Urus, matte black, custom-stitched interior, delivered to your driveway on a flatbed truck while your neighbors watch from their porches, pretending not to. $230,000. You don't even ask about the financing. You just ask them to fill the tank. Within 3 weeks, you've closed on a house in the hills. 6 bedrooms, a wine cellar, a pool that seems to spill directly into the horizon, the kind of place you used to slow down and stare at when you drove past it as a kid. $9.2 million paid in cash, and the realtor calls you one of the good ones because you didn't even negotiate. You furnish it top to bottom in 6 weeks. Original art you don't fully understand, but love the way it makes the walls look. A private chef named Antoine who trained in Lyon and makes you things you can't pronounce. A closet that used to be a guest bedroom, now filled with suits, watches, sneakers you'll wear once. You stop checking prices, you stop checking anything. By month 3, you're not the person you used to be, and you like it. You're invited to a private party in Malibu, thrown by someone whose name you don't fully catch, hosted on a yacht anchored just off the coast, string lights strung across the deck, champagne that costs more per bottle than your old monthly rent. You dance until 3 a.m. with people who tell you that you have incredible energy, incredible taste, incredible everything. You believe them. You start a small production company because a guy at that party, smooth-talking, well-dressed, tells you it's the smartest $4 million you'll ever spend. You don't ask many questions, you just wire it. You buy a second home in Aspen, ski in, ski out, $7.4 million because the guy from the yacht party mentions he has one too. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're starting to keep score without realizing it. You buy a private jet membership, $40,000 a month just for access before you've even flown once. You tell yourself it's an investment in your time. You start flying friends, new friends, the kind who appeared in your life sometime around month 2, to dinners in Tokyo and long weekends in Ibiza. You pick up every check, every single one. It becomes a kind of identity, the person who pays. 6 months in, you've spent close to $60 million. And it has felt every single day like the best year of your life. Now here comes the twist, Chapter 2, the first crack. The production company loses $11 million in its first year. Nobody tells you this directly. You find out slowly, buried in a report from a business manager you hired in month 2, a man named Curtis who came recommended by the same yacht crowd, and who you have never once questioned, because questioning felt like the opposite of the life you are now living. You call Curtis. He tells you not to worry. He tells you the fund he moved a portion of your money into, a private real estate development in Texas, is going to more than make up for it. You don't ask which fund, you don't ask what percentage. You've stopped asking percentages of anything months ago. Around the same time, the IRS sends a letter. You owe estimated taxes on capital gains you didn't realize you'd triggered from asset sales Curtis made without walking you through the consequences. $3.6 million due in 45 days. You pay it without panic. There's still plenty left. That's what you tell yourself. Month 9. The Texas Real Estate Fund collapses. Not slowly, all at once, the way these things tend to happen when nobody's been watching closely. Curtis calls to explain using words like unforeseen market conditions and temporary illiquidity. And you realize, sitting in your kitchen that overlooks the pool that spills into the horizon, that you don't actually know where $41 million of your money currently is. You fire Curtis. It takes another 6 weeks and a new accountant, a careful woman named Priya, to fully understand the damage. The production company is worth almost nothing. The Texas fund is gone completely, no recovery expected. Legal fees to untangle the mess run past $2 million. The jet membership, the Aspen house, the yacht friends who stopped calling somewhere around the time the checks stopped coming. Priya sits across from you with a folder, and for the first time since the notification arrived, you're afraid to open it. The number inside isn't 800 million anymore. It's 91 million. In 11 months, you burned through nearly 90% of an inheritance that took a quiet, careful man 51 years to build. You sell the Rolex. You sell the Urus. You put the Hills house on the market at a loss because you bought at the top and the market has cooled. Antoine the chef is let go, kindly, with 3 months severance. You can no longer justify but insist on anyway because some part of you is still trying to be the person who pays. Here's what you understand now. Sitting in a smaller rental with the same view of an ordinary street you used to know so well. The money didn't disappear because you were reckless in one big moment. It disappeared in 100 small ones, each of which felt, individually, completely reasonable at the time. You never once asked what an asset was actually generating before you paid for it. The watches, the cars, the jet membership, all of it cost money every single month and produced nothing back. You mistook fast, generous spending for confidence, when it was actually the opposite. It was fear dressed up as ease, the fear of sitting quietly with a number that big and simply not knowing what to do with it yet. You hired the first person who sounded competent instead of the person who was actually accountable. Curtis came recommended by people who had every incentive to keep you spending, because a bigger version of you was good for their own social standing. You never once asked for a second opinion. You let new people into your life at the exact speed your money left it, and you never noticed the correlation until both were gone. Every person from the yacht, the jet trips, the constant dinners, they weren't drawn to you. They were drawn to the version of you that was disappearing fastest. And the deepest mistake, the one Edwin, in his own quiet way, seemed to understand for 51 years without ever having to say it out loud. Money that isn't protected by structure, patience, and people who are accountable to you and not the crowd around you doesn't compound. It evaporates, quietly at first, and then all at once. Now this is Chapter 3, the rebuild. $91 million is still, by any reasonable measure, an extraordinary amount of money. You know that now in a way you didn't 11 months ago, back when the number felt too big to be real and therefore too big to protect carefully. You keep the rental. You keep the ordinary car. You let Priya put what's left into the same kind of unglamorous, boring assets Edwin spent his whole life quietly collecting. Small commercial buildings, a stake in a regional utility company, nothing that requires a party to explain, nothing that needs anyone else's approval to feel real. The lesson didn't cost you everything. It cost you enough to finally understand the difference between having money and knowing what to do with it. If you could go back to that Tuesday morning, phone buzzing in the dark, here's what you'd say. Wait 90 days before you spend a single dollar on anything that doesn't produce income. Hire your accountant before you hire anyone else, and choose them because they say no to you sometimes, not because they make spending feel effortless. Every new friend who appears after the money does is a data point, not a friendship, until proven otherwise, slowly, over years. And the fastest way to lose a fortune isn't one bad decision. It's 100 small, reasonable feeling ones made by someone who never stopped to ask what the money was actually for. The number was never the point. It never is. What matters is what's still standing when the excitement wears off, and whether you built something that holds or just something that shined for a while before it didn't.